Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Climate Smart Floridians webinar series. This is a 6-week long series hosted by the University of Florida IFAS Extension. Again, this is over 6 weeks starting January 27th. We had our first talk last week focused on Climate 101. Today, our talk is focused on green building and energy. And then over the next few weeks, we'll focus on water, food, Florida-friendly landscaping, and consumption. So we hope you can join us for those talks as well. So today for our talk on green building and energy, we actually have two speakers for you, Ashley and Maria. So they will both be speaking with you today, and I'll let them get started.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Smith. I'm an associate professor at the University of Florida's Tropical Research and Education Center in Homestead, and I'm based in the Soil, Water, Ecosystem Sciences Department. I'm really excited for everybody to be joining us today. This session is part of our Climate Smart Floridian series, and today we are focusing on green building. When we think about climate action, we often think about transportation, energy production, etc. But buildings are actually one of the biggest pieces of that climate puzzle. Where and how we build shapes our energy uses, our carbon footprints, and even our health. Today, I'll give a short overview about what green building is, why it matters, especially here in Florida, and then we'll turn it over to learn what it looks like in practice to Maria. So today's discussion is really shaped around green building. Buildings of all types can be green, homes, offices, or schools, and they are all one of the largest sources of controllable greenhouse gas emissions because the design and efficiency choices that we make in these buildings directly affect our uses and energy for decades. What's important is that these emissions don't just come from turning on the lights or running that air conditioner or running that heat if you're in Florida right now, which is never something I thought I would say. They come from the entire life cycle of a building, from that extracting raw materials to manufacturing products to construction to daily operations, maintenance, and even into demolition. The emissions that come from materials and constructions is the embodied carbon. So the emissions that are inherent within the process itself. So when we're making building related decisions about materials, layouts, systems, size, plots, we're also making climate decisions, whether we realize it or not. A green building is best thought of as a high performance building that's environmentally friendly. The design of green buildings is purposeful in that it should use less energy and water. It has reduced material waste. And then there is this improvement of indoor air quality and ultimately of occupant health. And the goal of green building is that it will perform well over the entire lifespan of the building. One key word here when you think about all these terms for green building is durability. In Florida, where we deal with heat, humidity, storms, flooding, a building that lasts longer and requires fewer repairs is inherently more sustainable than another kind. Green building isn't about perfection. It's about making better decision choices through the life cycle of the building. So I just want you all to put in the chat some ideas that you might have on strategies that can be used in green building. I'll give you a minute to do that. Make use of light. Yes. Good one. Appropriate installation. Yes. More skylights, geothermal heating and cooling. That's another good example. Shades, indirect lighting. Yep. Hurricane resistance right there for us. You guys are already thinking about what makes buildings green. That's great. And they are all really about this increasing system durability and ultimately performance. So why does green building matter then? First, there's its environmental impact. Green buildings can reduce carbon emissions, help us manage resources more responsibly, and protect our ecosystems. The environmental impact of green building comes first to the carbon footprint, where uh, buildings account for that large share of global carbon emissions, and the construction and daily operation is really what's continuing to support that emission. Green buildings aim to be more energy efficient and incorporate more renewable energy sources. So by reducing this reliance on fossil fuels, then we can help to slow down our changing climate and be more sustainable for the future overall. They also promote biodiversity. This part might be a little hard to grasp, but when you think about it, it's a little bit removed, but really the green construction focuses on uh, the entire ecosystem and their whole surrounding environment. So by avoiding any unnecessary land clearing or incorporating green roofs and Florida-friendly landscaping and preserving vegetation that's there, this can ultimately help protect wildlife and plant life, and therefore protecting biodiversity and ecosystem services more broadly. Second is through this human health and well-being is another reason why green building matters. Green buildings have better ventilation, use non-toxic materials, capitalize on that natural light, and often have moisture control that all account for a healthier indoor space. It's something that we all really felt when we were stuck inside during the pandemic. We wanted that healthy space indoors. The better air quality comes from the fact that traditional buildings usually trap pollutants like from paints and carpets, but green buildings that use those non-toxic materials and have that advanced ventilation help to circulate that air more. This leads to fewer allergies and fewer respiratory problems, along with a decrease in other health issues for occupants. Capitalizing on that natural light and comfort is a key piece of green building, where their spaces are designed to maximize that natural light, which will ultimately reduce electricity uses and help us get back on track with our natural circadian rhythms. And then the third is the economic benefits of green building. Green buildings often have lower utility bills, higher property values, and may quantify for some rebates or incentives that over time will ultimately save money. As a society, we've come together to solve these complex environmental challenges before, and green building is just part of that ongoing transition into preserving our ecosystems, our environment, our world for future generations. And to address these current challenges, we have to be living in a more sustainable way, and including green building and choices about building in your decisions are part of that process. What's important to keep in mind is that what makes a building green isn't one single feature, although these single features do add up. It's the combination of the whole processing, going from design, construction to operation, and how all these features start to work together. That's ultimately where we have this green building. These green buildings make a big difference. What we do have standards and codes and rating systems that help us measure that performance. But even if you don't go through the process of a formal certification, you can still use these principles of green building to get benefits of green building to ultimately help protect our ecosystems, our environment, and solve some of these complex environmental challenges. So globally, buildings account for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. In the United States, they account for about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. And of that, the 40% is coming from total energy uses, 65% from electricity demands, 30% from use of raw materials, and then about 30% is from total waste. And Florida plays a really important role here because we have hot and humid climate that really drives up those electricity demands, especially the need for air conditioning during those warm months. So there's ways to then improve building efficiency in Florida so that we can have huge impact both for reducing our emissions and also lowering our energy costs. And if we're if we're using a lot of energy to keep our houses cool in the summer, just changing your thermostat a little bit can really go a long way. When people hear green building, they often immediately think of solar panels. And solar panels are important, but they're also just one piece of the puzzle. There's a variety of other technologies and features of green buildings. There are efficient HVAC systems, rainwater harvesting, think rain barrels or rain gardens, green roofs that are reflective to keep heat at bay, and then just that use of low toxicity materials are all pieces of what can make a building green. And the biggest gains in terms of our green building and reduced greenhouse gas emissions does come from when they are designed together and actually at the beginning rather than when included as upgrades later. Green building certificates are formal systems or standards that evaluate and recognize how environmentally friendly, sustainable, and healthy a building is. These certificates assess factors like energy efficiency, water conservation, indoor air quality, use of sustainable materials, and the building's overall impact on the environment and human health. The certificates are helpful because they help create this shared definition of what it means to be a green building. LEED certified is probably the most widely recognized green building certificate. It awards points for certain areas like energy efficiency, water use, materials, indoor environmental quality. And then they have different levels. So a building can just be certified, rated silver, gold, or platinum based on how many points they achieve. There's also the WELL building standards, and WELL focuses specifically on health and well-being. It evaluates how buildings support human performance through air quality, water quality, nourishment, and light and movement. BREEAM is another certification program that's mostly based in the UK, and it assesses the environmental performance similarly to how the LEED certification does. And these pieces then are all features and certificates form that backbone of green building design. They help us reduce environmental impact, protect occupant health, and then improve long-term performance and the value of these buildings. The exciting part about all of these certifications and pieces of or features that get incorporated into green building is that these technologies are not just for these huge buildings. They can really happen at a local level, at an individual homeowner level, and the technologies are continuing to advance to rapidly to make sure they're becoming more affordable and more efficient year after year. And they also provide a useful framework for thinking about what that green building is. So even if you go and look at some of these standards and learn more about what goes into these certifications, but never pursue a certification, I think it gives you the chance to incorporate some of these green building practices into whatever construction opportunities you might be working with. And so they can be inspiration, even though you don't have to go all the way through to the certification process. The Built Center in Seattle is often considered the greenest commercial building in the world. It was completed in 2013, and it's a 16-story office building designed to meet these living building challenge. It's the most rigorous green building standard globally. The Built Center is pictured here, and it's a near net zero for energy and water use. It uses non-toxic materials, composting toilets, and really capitalizes on the daylight and for heating and cooling. Its energy use, according to the EPA, is 83% less than comparable office buildings. And it's 100% off the grid when it comes to water supply. So zero water utility bills, and more, well, from the carbon accounting perspective, it's also carbon neutral. So there are zero emissions. I know Florida looks very different than Seattle, but the lessons that we have from these opportunities in other places can really help what we're doing here. We can't exactly copy these designs, but recognizing that high-performing buildings are possible right now, I think is really important. And it's not just part of the future. But we do have examples that are here in Florida. I highlighted here the Miami Beach Convention Center, which I live in Homestead, so this is in my backyard. And it is a Silver LEED certified building. What I love about this building is these fins. And you can see that in their design there, those like white pieces that run along the side of the building. These fins are designed in a way to move with the sun or to capture the sun so that they do provide shade effectively during the year or the day. They also have installed reduced flow water fixtures and have high efficiency LED lighting throughout. Another cool feature of this convention center is that green spaces were really integrated into the overall design of the center. If you haven't had a chance to go explore the convention center, I highly recommend it. It's a very, very pretty building. And also, it's LEED certified. So those two ideas of aesthetics and environmental benefits can go hand in hand. So I just went on about the benefits of green building, but there are some real barriers too. Uh, the highest issue, or the biggest issue, is that upfront costs can be really high. Sustainable materials, energy efficient systems, green building certifications all come with these initial price tags that can be pretty steep. But the benefit is that over time, you can actually get some return on that investment. In some cases, that return can take 5 to 10 years. Uh, and but you'll eventually start to see that benefit. So sure, there's a little bit more upfront cost, but ultimately reducing your energy costs by 30 to 50% over time. And that's shifting from short-term thinking to long-term value. That's how I think about my purses. Like I like to buy those really nice Coach Chanel purses and invest in it early so that it lasts for a long time. Another challenge with green building is this lack of awareness, and not many developers or clients know necessarily about green building or are trained in sustainable design. So it makes it difficult to fully understand or incorporate some of the green building features into design. And then we also have regulatory and zoning issues. Some cities don't allow things like composting or rainwater harvesting or solar panels due to outdated codes. And so permitting can become a challenge. But this is where policy change is really critical. And understanding the benefits of green building can then ultimately lead to that policy change and make sure that we don't have these issues with regulation and zoning issues in the future. Building codes is something that I just wanted to briefly touch on, and to remind everybody that building codes are the minimum set of standards, not the best practices. In Florida, codes are continuously evolving, particularly around energy efficiency and resilience. We're seeing more homes be put up on stilts in those coastal areas. We also have like hurricane standards and homes with category 5 rated impact windows that all resulted from Hurricane Andrew. And so these codes are really adjusting based on the needs of people and the needs of the environment. So I expect that there be more adaptation of stringent codes in the future. Speaking of the future, what does this mean for the future of green building? There are a lot of trends in green building going forward. This net zero buildings are becoming more and more popular. Integrating smart responsive systems. So those are that adjusting in real time for temperature and comfort. And then also just having that climate resilience design, which may incorporate ways to withstand those extreme weather like storms and floods and heat waves. And then ultimately by including green building into by integrating more green building practices, we have a role in climate resiliency by reducing carbon emissions and ultimately leading to a longer, more sustainable development. But I think what's really important here for everyone on this call is that the role of green building is that everyone who's partaking in it can lead by example and ultimately work to help shape policies around green building going forward and making it become the norm. I just talked a lot about principles and what we can actually do. Green building doesn't require perfection or a brand new net zero home. The biggest gains usually come from just a few core principles: designing with efficiency and durability, prioritizing cooling, installation, shading, and ventilation, especially here in Florida, and then choosing materials that protect both occupant health and the long-term performance. Those certifications and codes are helpful guides, but they're just starting points. Start asking questions early and often and learning from projects that are already underway to see how you can integrate those principles of green building. And this brings me to the second part of today's talk, where we want to go from those principles and put into practice. So rather than ending with more theory, we're going to hear from Maria Pirelli, who's actually making these decisions right now. Maria, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am excited to get started, so I will get right to it. I'm here to share my very real and still ongoing journey to build a sustainable home in unincorporated Miami-Dade County. I'm not an architect or a builder, just a citizen trying to build differently with resilience, climate, and ecology in mind. This story is rooted in Miami, but I know many of you are joining from across South Florida or from across Florida. And I want to emphasize that while environmental conditions I'm working with are specific to my location, many of these ideas and principles I'll share can be applied anywhere, in part or in whole. My hope is that this story inspires you and makes the process feel a little more possible, even if you're starting from scratch like I did. Before I ever planned to build, I was renting in this neighborhood, walking the land, watching the water rise during heavy rain, talking with neighbors, and feeling more and more connected to the place. That time made it clear. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to build something that truly belonged here. Even in the heart of a growing city, I don't think we have to choose between density and nature. It's possible to design for both, as long as we center resilience, equity, and care for the land. This is what I call the middle of Miami, nicknamed Mom for short, a place where modern luxuries are all within reach. But I thought, at what cost? Decades of unconscious development have stripped away natural systems, fragmented wildlife habitats, and pushed people and nature further apart. What's left is a fragile landscape, paved over and increasingly vulnerable. As climate change accelerates, I believe Miami is at risk of experiencing catastrophic losses to both people and property, far sooner than many are willing to admit. So here we are, half an acre on the Biscayne Canal, just 5 feet above sea level. One of the last vacant residential lots of this size in the area. What drew me to it wasn't just the size, but the opportunity to build something meaningful from the ground up in a place I already knew and loved. Over the 5 years I've owned this land, I took the time to really understand it. That process led me to pursue not one, but 2 certifications in permaculture design. And I've leaned heavily on those systems thinking principles throughout the project. One of the core permaculture principles I've carried with me is observe and interact. That means taking time to understand what the land is already doing and responding to it, not forcing something onto it. The low elevation here brings serious vulnerability to future sea level rise and storm surge. That reality, paired with what I learned from the land itself and the surrounding community, shaped every design choice that followed. This area is an FEMA flood zone, a designated special flood hazard area zoned AE, the worst of its kind, and it includes many repetitive loss properties. The county has even created an adaptation action area study zone here, focused on the Biscayne Canal. What you're seeing here is a floodwater projection map. It shows where water is expected to move as sea levels rise. I was told by county staff that these paths trace old streams and wetlands that once flowed freely into Biscayne Bay, long before they were filled in for development. But water remembers. It doesn't care about property lines or paved streets. It finds its way back. As sea level rises, accelerates, these historic patterns are starting to reappear. It's a reminder that the past has a way of shaping the future. This was October 2020. A very high king tide combined with 6 to 7 inches of rain in just over 48 hours. Floodwaters filled the streets, with some areas seeing up to a foot of standing water. People were kayaking. Cars were stuck. This wasn't a hurricane. It was just a heavy rain and a high tide combined. The real issue here is elevation. The land is so low that even with traditional drainage systems, the water has nowhere to go. Long term, this means that simple fixes won't be enough. Redevelopment and elevation will likely be necessary. The area is part of what the county calls an urban infill area, which basically means they want to pack in more development and increase density. Larger lots like mine attract developers and real estate investors. And even though this neighborhood floods regularly, there's no real push to change how we build. The building codes don't reflect what's already happening on the ground, and there's no urgency to innovate. What's worse is that the many of these new developments are being built at slightly higher elevations, adding fill, paving over open space, and in doing so, they're displacing water onto surrounding homes. Water that used to absorb into empty lots now floods someone's yard. That's what I find most concerning. We're building the future with yesterday's rules, and we're making the problem worse in the process. That's exactly why I felt like I had to try something different and, like Ashley said, lead by example. With all these challenges, I still saw opportunity, not to escape, but to respond. I started asking, what would it look like to build with the land instead of against it? Could a home reflect the reality of flooding and still feel grounded, beautiful, and connected? That question became the foundation for this project, a chance to design something simple, adaptive, and future-facing, something that belongs here and maybe encourages others to think differently about what we build and why. Our first step was to assess what was already on the site. Most of the lot was covered in grass, which might seem low maintenance, but in this climate, it's actually resource heavy and needs constant mowing and doesn't support biodiversity. We also identified invasive plant species, including Brazilian pepper and Bachophia, which had to be removed carefully. These kinds of plants spread aggressively and crowd out native plant species. This was the groundwork, clearing out what didn't belong so we could move forward with intention. To replace the grass, we tapped into local resources. We reached out to the many tree trimming crews working in the area, and we were able to bring in over 100 truckloads of free mulch. It served multiple purposes. It helped us eliminate the turf without chemicals, started regenerating the soil, and we knew we could use it later for shaping the land. All of those wood chips would have gone to a landfill. So it was also a way to reduce waste while improving the site. We estimated that we diverted at least 500 cubic feet of plant material, mostly oak, mahogany, and mango, all chipped and returned right back to the soil. The site plan was designed to use space, energy, and resources as efficiently as possible, while also stacking functions wherever we could. We chose to place the house farther back from the street, centered within the planting zones. Elevating it on stilts protects against flooding, and building up instead of out keeps the footprint small. The orientation also maximizes solar potential, which is key for long-term energy performance. The surrounding zones support food, habitat, and water management, creating a system where everything works together. We're planning to use as many sustainable and salvaged materials as possible, not just for appearance, but for durability. That includes recycled steel for structural components and salvaged natural stone, ideally sourced from local quarry sites. Both of these materials can withstand hurricanes better than many conventional options, and they reduce the environmental cost of new extraction and manufacturing. And throughout the project, we're always thinking about our most abundant and sometimes most challenging resources, solar and water. So we're designing systems to work with them, not against them, capturing, storing, reusing wherever we can. The house is oriented to maximize solar exposure with a flat metal roof that can give us a generous surface area for solar panels. With efficient design and smart energy use, the system can cover most, if not all, of the home's daytime energy needs, especially when paired with passive cooling strategies. People often ask about the environmental impact of solar panels themselves. While there is an upfront energy cost to produce them, that energy is typically offset within the first 1 to 3 years of use. Over a 25 to 30-year lifespan, the net benefit is significant, especially when paired with energy-efficient systems and passive design. One overlooked bonus is that panels also act like a sun shield, absorbing sunlight that would otherwise heat the roof directly. That helps reduce indoor cooling loads, especially in our hot climate. And while a panel's output won't improve over time, choosing solar now supports innovation across the board. From smarter inverters to energy storage to local grid resilience, it's not just about your house now, it's part of a much bigger system shift. A key part of the design is managing stormwater entirely within the site, not just during major storms, but in everyday conditions too. We'll be building a 3 to 4 foot earthen berm around the perimeter to keep contaminated runoff from nearby streets out, while containing and directing rainfall completely on the property. The land will be graded to slope toward the canal, with 1 or more retention ponds that double as irrigation storage and flood buffers. Importantly, the majority of the site will remain permeable. The house has a compact footprint, and driveways will use gravel or porous material, allowing rain to soak into the ground instead of running off. That reduces flooding risks and helps recharge the soil. We'll also be planting aquatic vegetation and water-loving trees to support filtration, biodiversity, mosquito control. It's truly about designing a system that's not just reactive, but regenerative. The roof will be slightly sloped to one side so that rainwater naturally flows into a gravity-fed barrel system. No pumps, no electricity, just using what's already moving. With a roof this size, 1 inch of rain gives us over 900 gallons of water. That's enough to keep a veggie garden going for weeks, especially when you combine it with good soil and mulch. Instead of letting water run off into the street or contribute to flooding and ponding, we're capturing it and putting it to use for irrigation or with a little filtration, even as an emergency backup if needed. It's a passive, reliable system that reflects how we've tried to design with water, not against it. At the back of the property, right along the canal, we've planted native bald cypress and pond cypress trees that actually thrive in standing water. Some went directly into the canal, where they'll help stabilize the banks, filter runoff, provide habitat, and absorb a huge amount of stormwater over time. This ties back to one of my favorite permaculture principles: small and slow solutions. These trees may seem tiny now, but they're long-term players, quietly doing the work year after year. Fun fact: a single mature bald cypress can absorb more than 500 gallons of stormwater a day. That's just one tree. Now imagine if every yard in this flood-prone neighborhood had even one mature cypress. The collective impact could be transformational. It's a simple, often overlooked solution that costs little but gives back for generations. Here's an example. This is from a neighbor just a few blocks away. This retention pond was created less than 5 years ago, and you can already see it's full of life. It naturally fills during heavy rains and gradually recedes during dry periods. It's a great example of how small landscape shifts can restore function and beauty at the same time. The maturing cypress trees around the edges are thriving, and the space has become a small wildlife haven. In permaculture, we say, use and value the edges. This was just a low spot in the yard. Now it's one of the most regenerative elements on the property. It's a great reminder that these systems don't take decades to work, just thoughtful design and a bit of patience. When it came to wastewater, we loved the idea of composting toilets, but in an urban setting like this, that just wasn't going to fly with Miami building inspectors. There's no access to sewer here, so a septic system was our only real option. And since 2023, the county's rules have significantly changed. Miami-Dade no longer permits conventional septic systems for new builds or reinstallations. Instead, they now require enhanced performance-based systems that better protect water quality near surface water like we are. That meant a more complex and, of course, a more expensive setup than we originally planned for. But the upside is a cleaner system overall with less nutrient pollution reaching the canal and surrounding environment. We're also designing for gray water reuse, collecting sink, shower, and laundry water and routing it through either a mechanical system or a more passive plant-based filter so it can be reused for irrigation. So while we're not fully off-grid, we're doing our best to make every drop count and to treat water like the precious resource it is. I've been composting for years, using a small countertop system that dries and grinds food scraps. I collect the output and use it to amend my garden beds. It's a lovely setup. But now with more space, I'm planning to build a larger outdoor system that can handle both kitchen scraps and yard clippings. The goal is simple: return nutrients to the soil, not the landfill, and to treat organic waste like the resource it really is. Again, in permaculture, this ties to the principle of return the surplus. Give back what you don't need and let nature do the rest. And considering that food waste makes up about a third of what ends up in landfills, composting is a small habit that can have a big impact on the entire region as well as your trash can. You'll never have a smelly trash bin again. Here's a simple view of how composting works. Layering green materials like food scraps with browns, like leaves or cardboard. Over time, it breaks down into dark, rich soil full of life. If you've ever tried gardening in South Florida, you know how tough it can be with our sandy soil. It drains quickly, holds no nutrients, and leaves both amateur and experienced gardeners frustrated. Compost helps turn that around. It improves moisture retention, brings microbial life back into the soil, and creates the conditions plants actually thrive in. Before planting anything new, we of course started by paying attention to what was already here. These mature avocado and mango trees were growing strong without any irrigation or fertilizer, which told me a lot. They weren't just surviving, they were already thriving. Along with a few scattered coconut palms, they were already producing some of my favorite foods. So of course they had to stay. They ended up shaping the house placement and overall landscape design. From there, I started thinking about the bigger picture, not just planting what looks good or checks a sustainability box, but building a system that's actually resilient and functional. That meant thinking about how we move through the space, how much care each area needs, and how all the elements could support each other, from the soil to the stormwater to the people living here. That mindset led me to one of the most useful tools I picked up through permaculture, the concept of zoning, which I'll briefly walk you through now. Zone 1 is just steps from the kitchen. It'll be home to herbs, medicinals, and seasonal vegetables, things we'll harvest often. This side of the house gets morning sun and afternoon shade, which helps prevent heat stress for these tender plants. We'll also use vertical growing techniques here to pack more into a compact space. Zone 2 wraps around the north and south sides of the house. It's still visible from the home and will focus on native wildflowers, pollinator plants, and perennial shrubs that provide both food and beauty. Think of it as a small food forest full of layers, color, and biodiversity. Zone 3 runs along the outer edges and is where we'll plant larger native and fruit trees. Higher areas near the front will get native slash pines, which are nearly extinct in our region, and the back canal border will be lined with native cypress. We'll also build fruit tree guilds around the existing avocado and mango trees, and even grow dragon fruit vertically on supporting trees. Zone 4 is our wild edge. It's designed for water management, with swales, a retention pond, and the canal itself working together to slow and store rainwater, supporting habitat, and reduce flood pressure on neighboring properties. Here's a simple example of using vertical space. These dragon fruit vines are growing right up on the trunk of a tree. It saves rooms on the ground, adds food production, and just works with what's already there. It's low effort, high reward, the kind of functional relationship we try to design for. A few years ago, on Earth Day, we were gifted over 100 native pine and cypress trees. It was part of a local giveaway that didn't have enough people show up, and these trees were literally going to be thrown away. It turned out to be the perfect moment. We hadn't started construction yet, so we were able to plant the full perimeter without worrying they'd be disturbed later. Sometimes the timing just lines up and you just have to act. The pines and cypress were planted immediately following our perimeter plan, and the non-native palms that were there were excavated carefully and either donated or even sold. Up front, we wanted something that would invite conversation, something visible and beautiful and ecologically meaningful. So we turned the front area into a native wildflower garden, even though we knew it would likely be ripped up later during construction. It attracts pollinators, but it also attracts people. Neighbors stop, they ask questions, and that leads to deeper conversations about what we're trying to build here, not just another McMansion. We partnered with a local landscaping company that shares our values around habitat restoration. In exchange for letting them place a small sign, they planted over 150 pollinator attracting annuals and perennials at a much lower cost. This project isn't just about one house. It's about realigning how we live with where we live. It's about making every choice count for more than just ourselves. When we design with intention, the returns go far beyond the financial. We create a ripple effect, reducing environmental impact, building community, and inspiring others to see what's possible right where they are. Thank you so much for allowing me the time to share my story. I truly appreciate it.
That was great, Maria. Thank you so much. We have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to open it up with a few questions that I have for you, and hopefully everyone else can give everyone a second to think and put some in the chat. So, what inspired you to really begin building this home in the first place?
Yeah, like I said, I lived it first. I experienced it. I became really connected to the community and also the opportunity for a challenge. There was so much of that for me, and I guess at the time in my life, which was only short 5 years ago to right now, that's exactly the inspiration and motivation that I was looking for, and I so truly resonated with building in this way, so much so that I did go ahead with 2 permaculture certifications, which is a very life-changing experience because it's a full systems way of thinking and not just in building and everything.
Yeah, no, it was great to see all that come together. We have a couple questions. Can you see what does the house property look like now? What's your current status?
A fantastic question. And like I said in the beginning, it is an ongoing process. And I will admit we've had some contractor troubles and some resistance with planning and permitting from the county level. With some of the ideas. For instance, I'll share for example, the house cannot be placed as far back from the front property line as I would like because there are certain front property setback lines that you would think that's very explicitly stated in the building code manual, but it is not. And even county officials themselves didn't have a direct answer for me and took a lot of time to actually figure out what that front setback was because apparently nobody tries to go against that and just builds a house right in front as close to the sidewalk as possible. So how does the house look like now? There is no house right now, but there are lots of trees. It's flourishing. We've packed in the perimeters as much as possible. And the house plans are evolving with a new builder potentially exploring the idea of doing an owner builder style permit where we'll be learning even more on how to hire subcontractors ourselves and build a house in that way using prefabricated steel insulated special panels from potentially one of the suppliers could be a company called EcoSteel.
Well, Jean Smith in the chat said she would love a virtual tour of the finished product. So I feel like that is
This
something we'll have to follow up with you on.
I love that. Thank you so much for that motivation. This is a project for the history books. So maybe we'll do a full expose on start to finish. And that's something that I've learned along the way, right? Document more because truly we can all learn from something from this. And by the way, if there's anyone in the audience that has any tips or materials or anything for me, I'm always learning. So please do share. You never know who's listening.
Yeah, crowdsource it. Casey wants to know if the Middle of Miami Green plans will be open source.
I would love to share it. Absolutely. That's what this is all about.
John has a question on what did you use for water tank?
So I have a couple options. Anything from one option is just a regular rain barrel. You've seen them. They're usually blue or green or something like that. But there's another type of another type of water storage collection system that I'm looking at that is actually a different shape. It's more slim and streamlined, where you can stack a few of them side by side or along the wall of the property to be a little bit more concealed, maybe with a little bit of greenery around it. So I can share the name of it as soon as it comes to my mind, but that's another option I'm looking at.
Cool. Uh, where can you get a permaculture certificate?
There's lots of different options. I would do a simple Google search. One out of the two that I took are not existent anymore. The other one is. It's called EcoVersity. There's that option. And yeah, like I said, simple Google search. There's plenty of certifications out there. But I would probably look for a course that is very closely related to the person that came up with these concepts, which his name is Jeff Lawton.
Great. We have some comments about county permitting and codes seem to be a headache for everybody in Florida. Could you just talk a little bit more about some of your permitting process?
Yeah. So before I started this project, I was actually I took on a remodeling project in the city of Miami Beach. And what I learned with applying for permits in Miami Beach versus at the county level, since this is unincorporated Miami-Dade County, that is at the county level. And I think, Ashley, as you touched on, the cities and the municipalities sometimes have stricter codes and regulations than the county does, which is very true, especially in Miami Beach, because that is very coastal and has a lot stricter rules and regulations. So what I learned is being in the unincorporated county gives you a slight leg up and advantage to being able to be a little bit more flexible with what you can do. And it also gave me more direct contact with county staff and the ability to have both meetings in person, online, over the phone, and actually discuss my plans, even though it took many tries as well as lots of time. Having a building in a place where the building department is very accessible is a huge advantage because it'll save you a lot of time in planning, basically. I'm not sure that everyone or the person that asked is in Miami-Dade County, so if you have follow-up questions related to that, I can get into that, but I don't want to get too much into Miami-Dade County and how they operate.
Yeah, I do. We
But
had some
no composting toilets.
we had some construction down at our research center, and people from main campus in Gainesville were working on it, and they had to get their head around all the codes and additional requirements that we had here compared to what they have in Gainesville. So it is going to be a unique situation wherever you are.
Yeah, and for example, I even throw in when you're dealing with septic system installation, now you're at the state level, and that's not even the county level. That's governed by the state of Florida, so that's a whole different department. So if you're in an area that requires septic as opposed to sewer, be prepared to also learn some things.
I saw a question. Okay, so speaking of that, there's a question on, is the house design plan finished? And then are you going to ever plan to connect to sewer?
There's a program that's called Connect to Protect, but that is not Miami wide, county wide. It's just certain areas, and what they're doing with that is they're funding that project so that way the burden doesn't fall on the homeowner. But it's in very small areas, and where it's not available, it's just not available. And I believe that in this area, like I showed you on the map, that it's very flood prone. I believe that sewer will never be available. And the simple reason for that is because of the high groundwater table and how close it is to the surface. And displacing the land and trying to build a sewer system will probably cause more harm than good. And what I believe is going to happen over time is that those very old septic systems that are very much failing, they've done a study on this, which is part of that adaptation action area I mentioned. Since they are failing, it's a known fact, and you already know the effects of that. What I think is going to happen is they're going to eventually, I don't want to say force, but eventually try to make sure that all of those systems do get replaced to the higher standard systems that are kind of like mounded systems. So they're at a higher level than what the groundwater is. So that way there's no chance of contaminating that wastewater with the groundwater, as well as adding these additional enhanced layers to remove the nutrients before it even gets to the ground and to the passive filtration systems, which is the way that septic systems work.
I I think septic gets a bad reputation. If it's done correctly and properly and maintained, it can be a very efficient and a good way to treat our water. So,
Agreed. It's almost like a composting toilet.
yeah. Uh, Casey wants to know if you can get a variance and then has a question about SIP panels.
I believe the question is related to the setback from the front of the house.
Ah,
I have thought of this. And I went down this road of trying to figure out how to get a variance for building the house further back from the front property line. And it's possible. Yeah, anything's possible, I learned. And, all these developers that are increasing density are in areas where it's not allowed. That's what they're doing. They're applying for variances and they are getting them. Now, will they allow me my variance just because I want to build the house further back? I don't know. I don't know if I can make a good enough argument for it, but it's possible. I have to remind myself what the cost is to even apply for a variance and see if the cost really outweighs the benefit type of thing. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
SIP panel? Question mark? I don't
Hmm.
I don't know what a SIP panel is. Casey, if you want to come off and follow up. SIP.
I don't know.
Um, let's see. There was a question that came in earlier, and I just want to make sure we hit on that with the last couple seconds about what about embodied energy? John lives in an 85-year-old house, which is only partially retrofitted, but most of the construction energy has been spent. So I don't know, Maria, if you want to take a thought at that, or I have some thoughts.
I'm going to let you handle that one first.
All right. I think that's a great question, John, and something to really think about. You have to weigh the costs of preserving versus the cost of the energy uses that your house does have. And that's kind of the operating, how I would operate. If you were to tear down the old house and replace it, then that has a whole new set of embodied energy costs. And so might actually become not as beneficial. So I generally think that if you can spend the time to retrofit existing structures is maybe a better approach than knocking something down, because that's really the store of that energy. There's a few references that I have one reference in mind that I can pull for you if you want to know more. Maria, do you want to
Can
Yeah,
I
have anything
say
to add?
something?
sure.
Hi, I'm Christina. I actually used to work for North Miami,
Hi,
and
Christina.
hi. So I think you have my trees from Earth Day,
Oh,
which
thank
makes
you
me
so
really
much.
happy
How,
because I
how
had a lot
amazing.
of trouble giving them away. Um, so I know sewer can get a bad rep, but North Miami, they had a grant from the state for septic to sewer conversion. And I believe that covered also unincorporated areas. So I would follow up with their public works department.
We have a very close relationship.
Okay.
And multiple people have told me it's never coming or it's like 20 years down. That's
Okay. All right. Just
uh,
making sure you knew that. I believe it's not just for the city of North Miami. That grant was, I think it was $2 million or something from the
yeah.
state.
And the other thing that happens with the unincorporated areas is unless there's this special allocated funds to unincorporated, for instance, this adaptation action area, the first one was in Little River, the second one is the Biscayne Canal. So unless they specifically carve out funds for special projects in unincorporated areas, the money is not coming to help us. Like that is the long and hard lesson that I've learned. I'm part of my local civic association. We almost went through a failed attempt at incorporation back in 2020. So I've been through all the ups and downs of how it works to try to get funding for special projects and things that are needed, right? Things that they know are a problem. And it's a very long journey that I'm here for it, but I appreciate
Yeah.
I appreciate that as well as the trees. Thank you.
We are
No,
at
no
the
worries.
top
Follow
of
up with
our
Jeff Geimer, just in
Say it
case.
again,
Jeff Geimer.
Jeff.
Jeff Geimer, the Assistant Public Works Director. Follow up with him.
Okay, thank you.
that was great. We're at the top of our hour. Thank you all so much for your time today. And we did launch a quick poll. If you would take that before you jump off, we would really appreciate it. Maria, there are lots of questions on how people can stay connected with you. And so we'll follow up and you can share whatever resources you want. And we'll make sure that that goes out when we send everybody a recording of the video. So
Yeah, amazing. What I'll do is I'll send you my notes and my contact information. Happy to connect. Thank you so much, everyone.
thanks, everyone.